Listen and practice. Learn English by storytelling. Chapter 3.
Remember Supriyo, that good-looking boy? He didn't belong to any party either. I heard from my neighbor that they cut his face to pieces. I reminded Taro of that. He still wouldn't listen. Finally, I told him he was a fool who lived in dreamland, hiding from the world behind his mother's sari. How could he throw away this chance, I shouted, when I'd worked so hard to bring him this far? I said he was ungrateful and causing me pain. Didn't he see that I couldn't sleep at night, worrying because he was here? You can imagine how I hated saying it. I could see the Abhiman on his face, like a wound, but it was the only thing I knew that would make him go. She had been right. He had gone. What she hadn't realized was how final that leaving would be. Today, I am thinking about the word Ma used. Abhiman. That mix of love and anger and hurt which lies at the heart of so many of our Indian stories, and for which there is no word in English. If Taran pushed her away, would the red-haired girl feel Abhiman? Or can we only experience such a feeling when the language of our childhood has made it real in our mouths? My mother's letter made me sad, but it was sadness of a peculiar, distant kind. I knew how serious the situation in Calcutta was, but somehow my own problems seemed more real than my mother's. The pain of my daughter's first teeth coming through, the bad smell in our apartment, the arguments every evening with Sandeep, which were always followed by uneasy lovemaking. A few weeks later, when Taran arrived in Vermont and rang me, his voice over the phone line was edged with a sharp silver need, but it belonged to that other, faraway life and didn't touch me. I hated this change in myself. I realized I could no longer feel for other people or understand their fears and worries. But what to do about it? Did anyone else suffer from such a disease? I was afraid to ask Sandeep, the only person I knew well enough in America to ask. I kept my mother's letter for a long time at the bottom of my jewelry case. And then, during a move to a new house, I lost the letter. By then it was too late anyway. The first few months after moving to this country, Taran called me almost every day. He hated cooking for himself, hated coming home in the evenings to an empty room. It was so cold in Vermont, he felt he was slowly freezing. I forced myself not to listen to the desperate note in his voice. Sandeep was firmly against any family, his or mine, coming to live with us. So I used to say to Taran things like, "We all went through the same thing. Before you know it, you'll get used to this lifestyle." It was hard to think of anything more helpful to say with the baby screaming in my ear or the rice boiling over. And Sandeep, like most husbands brought up in India, no help at all. Taran was usually silent for a moment. Then he used to say goodbye in a quiet voice. For a long time, I didn't know about the bad feeling between Ma and Taran, although I wonder now whether it was more that I didn't want to know. I'd had my second baby by then, and Sandeep and I were finally falling in love. I was afraid that even one careless word could destroy our little house of kisses. So when I rang up India, and Ma said it had been a long time since she had heard from Taran, she was too proud to say any more. Could I call him and make sure he was okay? I never let myself take it seriously. "Oh, Ma," I used to say brightly, "stop worrying. He isn't a baby anymore." Then I left a short message on Taran's phone, telling him to write home and adding something cheerful about his nieces. Those days, I worked hard at being cheerful, because Sandeep had told me that men disliked miserable women. Still, one night after Ma had been more anxious than usual, I spoke to Sandeep. I waited until after lovemaking, when he was usually in a generous mood, and asked him if Taran could stay with us for the summer holidays. "I'm the only family he has here, after all," I said, "and he's always been so shy, not the kind to make lots of friends." Sandeep touched my face lightly. "We're just getting to know each other. Let's give ourselves and Taran a little more time alone, shall we?" When I hesitated, he sighed. "That's the trouble with our Indian families, always worrying too much. Your brother's probably having a great time at college. For all you know, he has plenty of girlfriends and would rather you didn't keep checking on him." I wanted to tell Sandeep, who was an only child, about those afternoons in Calcutta, the smell of cooking, the way, when Taran entered the kitchen, a certain seriousness in his face fell away. But Sandeep was yawning, and in a moment he would remind me he had to get up early and go to work. Why didn't I argue or threaten? Sandeep needed a wife as much as I needed a husband. He feared aloneness as much as I did. But in those early days, I was too unsure of myself, too much in love with being in love. It was easier to tell myself, as I lay against the warm curve of his back, in the sweet tiredness after lovemaking, that I would have a real heart-to-heart talk with Taran next weekend. But something always happened next weekend, and the one after, and the one after, until Taran's calls became shorter and less frequent, and his pauses were longer than all his words put together. But I wasn't listening. "Let me tell you what we did yesterday," I used to say brightly into the silence, into the years that hurried past us. Then I came back from seeing our mother in India and called him to say I had to come and see him immediately. He replied in a carefully polite voice, "Sure, come if you like." It hasn't been easy to talk to Taran here. When I reminded him of past times in the kitchen in Calcutta, he suddenly remembered something he had to do and went out.
Keep listening, learn English by storytelling. You will be improve your English. Definitely listen and practice.